to Watch is an intimate look into the lives of prominent and influential women leaders from around the world and the challenges they faced on their journey. It's the real story behind her title. Join us every week to hear more stories about women from around the world and in your own communities at womentowatch.net. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another week of Women to Watch. I'm Sue Rocco. Thanks so much for being with me. Joining me this week will be Kelly Hoey, and Kelly is the author of Build Your Dream Network. And she shares with me a really great story about meeting Malala at a very special dinner in New York. So I think you're going to enjoy it. As always, stay with us during the breaks where you'll hear from our watch team of corporate partners. And please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at W2W Media. So now I'm very honored and excited to welcome to the show, Kelly Hoey. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. We connected quite a while ago, and I think right off the top, I need to give a shout out to Heidi Messer for connecting us.
Please do. Fabulous Heidi Messer, and that was an amazing interview you had with her.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. She's such a dynamo. She made it easy. So listen, I wanted our viewers and our listeners to know that you grew up in Victoria, Canada, which when I looked it up, it's a beautiful, beautiful place. So I wonder if you can just describe for us the community there and the neighborhood you grew up in.
I want to say, a very picturesque, as the author Malcolm Gladwell said to me once, oh, you come from the pretty part of Canada. And yes, I do. Very bucolic. I mean, I feel very, you talk about your privilege growing up in a very safe community, growing up in a time and an era where, you went to public school, you didn't lock your doors, you rode your bike, you didn't have to lock it. It was wonderful in all of that, but it's also it's a bit of a village in the sense of limited horizons on what people thought was possible. In the sense of, oh, why would you ever leave such a beautiful place? And oh, you do this and you go to school and then you live in the same neighborhood that you always grew up in. And so a very great little kind of bubble, but not seeing beyond that bubble.
Kelly, that speaks directly to a quote I have where you said, I believe moving far away from my hometown was to extract myself from the demanding but limiting expectations of my family. And you shared with me, we had a wonderful intro call some time ago that you noticed that recollection is directly tied to what you're doing today. And I wonder if you can describe it a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, it's a couple of pieces of it. I think there is an element that our networks, sometimes our networks see more in us than we see in ourselves. And sometimes the networks we surround ourselves with, based on their fears, their hesitations, their worldview, they may kind of put too many fences and limit what is possible for us. They may not open that aperture for us to see that there is more. And in my own case, a lot of that came from my mother. Now, she, I want to say, someone who is, a boomer. She was, baby of World War II. Grew up in an era where, you could go and get an education, but you became a nurse or you became a teacher, and if you were lucky, you married a doctor or a high school principal, and you quit your job and you had babies. And my parents being married, and us kids born in the 60s. There's a whole lot of change that happened at that time. And you think the first wave of feminism, and that's when my parents got divorced. So all of a sudden, my mother's worldview of what she was and expected to do, and then the women's liberation movement, but you still had structures in place of, oh, women couldn't get credit cards, and here she was, a single mom with 3 kids. Like the whole lot of that, I think some of her own complexities and frustrations, disappointments, in either the way her life turned out in a career then thrust upon her again. I think a lot of that dynamic played out played out in my relationship with her and her demands and guidance that she gave me as the only daughter, sandwiched in between 2 brothers. As I'd like to jokingly say, funny, there was a lot of rules in my house that didn't apply to my brothers.
I've heard that quite often on this show. Yeah, it's amazing, the particular generation, and then I would say culture as well.
Hmm.
Um, you know, where your parents come from and where their parents come from. And did your mom, I'm curious, did she discuss these? I would say she was probably conflicted. As you said, there were expectations on her, and she did that, and then it kind of fell apart. And then, does she encourage you to do what she did, or does she explore the opportunities that are now in front of you and then have regrets? Did she talk to you about it, or?
Not really, but there was this very much like an expectation, like you do well in school, you go and get a degree, and then you go get higher educate. Like one degree wasn't enough. There had to be a second one. You sort of kept your head down and do good work. Like there was very sort of limited in terms of the imagination of what could be, as opposed
Mm,
to exploring. And then once you were in a role, well, you had to be the best, but it was also an element of don't reach too high. Now, there's that, if you've had others on your show who have come from, part of the extended British Commonwealth, like Canada, there is a thing we refer to as tall poppy syndrome. You can grow, but don't grow too high; others will, cut you down. So there is a cultural Canadian Commonwealth thing. I've talked to Australians and my Irish friends, my New Zealand friends, and we all have this kind of tall poppy. We
that's
live
interesting.
in it.
I've not heard that before. That's really interesting.
Yeah, like as a national kind of culture mindset. Like, don't get too big for your britches. Like, don't rise too high. Like, right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there is that sort of Canadian, but I also feel there was something with, again, I'm almost like want to put my mother in a petri dish in terms of analyzing her
Mm,
own life, and
mhm,
and wanting her children to succeed, but at the same time, don't succeed too much.
hmm.
And that could be her own layer of disappointment with the way her life turned out.
Yeah. So that's pressure. I mean, I'm
Mhm.
assuming, you felt the pressure of all that. How did you do in school?
Well, I'm a Virgo. Listen, I was part, and also brought up to be the good girl.
Right. The good girl. Yeah.
Right. And so
Yeah.
that was a really big thing, to be like, I needed to be the good girl. So this is where, like I said, that this interesting dynamic and conflict, and then realizing, as you pointed out, at some point I had to extract myself from my, family of origin and be a far distance away so that that influence couldn't continue itself.
Okay.
But yeah, it was like, you brought home those good grades, or you have to explain that. I remember my brothers both went to private school at one point, and that was their punishment for not doing well. And I'm like, I'm the one who's studying. Shouldn't I get the privilege of
Yeah.
private school?
There was a lot of unfairness back in that time. It's amazing how far we've come. Um, So tell me, when did you make the decision? When did you recognize? How old were you when you recognized, I really need to, as beautiful as this place is, I need to go venture out?
Well, it's sort of, baby steps. Kind of letting yourself out of the beautiful jail. when I went to law school, I moved away and went to the University of British Columbia and did law school there. And then, sometimes there's the things internally that and then life and circumstances, external world also gives you a little boost and help. And when I graduated from law school, so in Canada, when you graduate from law school, you have to do a year that's called, your articling. You have to article for a year, which basically is like professional mentoring. So you get hired by a law firm. You're not a law student anymore, but you're not a lawyer. It's this year of working and training, and you take your exams. So this sort of institutionalized professional accreditation that includes this big aspect of mentoring. And at that time, articling student salaries varied very much across. It'd be like if in the United States, it's like if every state had this requirement, but the salaries were different depending on whether you were in New York or California or Texas or Florida or Alabama, like wherever you were. So the salaries in British Columbia were about a third of what it was in Ontario and in Toronto. And I was in Vancouver and I had decided I wanted to do corporate law. Most head offices in Canada are in Toronto. Cost of living in the two cities was equal at the time. And the salary was 2/3 more in Ontario. So it was like,
Wow.
see ya.
Yeah. That was a smart decision.
So listen, sometimes, the universe, external factors play out in your favor, and to be able to say, actually, no, to do these things that I want to do. I mean, years later, when there was a chance for me to move back, there could have been a chance for me to move back to the West Coast. And again, it was one of those things. It's like, no, I built my life here now. And
Yeah.
so I will stay East.
Did the people around you, friends and family, question your decision to move away?
Um, Not really, not
Okay.
really. There was an element they thought, oh yeah, we always knew you'd be a lawyer. I don't know how they knew that one, but
Did
anyway.
would you say you didn't know? I mean, tell me about your decision to go to law school.
I
What prompted
knew
that?
there was this expectation of doing another degree. So in
Okay.
my mind, it was MBA or a law degree.
No doctor? No medical degree?
My dad's a veterinarian, and unfortunately, none of us were really enthusiastic about that.
Okay.
But yes, it was. Yeah, so it's so funny because my parents. I mean, every Canadian other than Indigenous Canadians are, immigrants to Canada. But it's not like my parents were recent immigrants. Yet, it almost, saying this to you now, it's just like coming to me. It's almost having like that immigrant mentality of, you know, having to do well and having to get these degrees, like so we can do better than we did in the old countries. But my mom had degrees, my dad had multiple degrees, my grandfather was an architect, other grandfather. I'm like, all the who knows, I could be on Freud's couch for years trying to analyze it. We'll just roll with it as a fact as opposed to figuring out the why. So
Yeah, yeah. So tell me your first job out of law school.
I I want to say I worked for a law firm by the name of Miller Thompson for my articling year, and the first kind of, I would say, 3.5 years of my legal experience there, doing corporate generally. I had the off chance to be staffed on a bankruptcy, a large real estate company, and that changed my legal career in Toronto. I absolutely loved the work and had an extraordinary mentor. He was one of these people who really guided the careers of those he worked with. That was critical to him. As he used to say to people, I train my assassins. And in giving us so much responsibility, like just enough rope, but not enough to hang ourselves. But he gave us so much responsibility. By doing that, he built a very successful legal practice and endeared us with like incredible loyalty. Like, He'd do anything for this guy,
Yeah.
which was
You know,
ultimately his own downfall, but that's a different story. But it was an incredible opportunity, and that really gave me the chance to move from kind of it's somewhat floundering, like, oh, gee, what do I want to focus on, kind of thing, as we often do early in a career,
yeah.
to like, I love this area of law. I love doing this.
It's so interesting to me how very often and this speaks directly to what you're trying to help other people with, understanding the power of networking and meeting people. And so often somebody else will say something to us and it wakes us up,
Hmm.
perhaps to a gift we didn't even know we had. Um, I and I'm going to share another quote because you talk a lot about being a late bloomer, which I wouldn't say you were quite a late bloomer, but you said my story is one of being a late bloomer. I wish I knew when I was young because I would have enjoyed the journey more. I was always frustrated and not achieving at the speed of others. I think a lot of women do that, right? So you're driving and you're driving and you're working, you're looking around and seeing people getting to levels quicker.
Yeah. I think there was an element. So let's go back to, sort of the family emotional baggage, I think, taking into getting a law degree. It was not like I had a great passion for the law, I'll be honest. It was not like something, watching LA Law, that'll date me and everybody else who, if you don't know the reference, kids, go to YouTube,
I
go
thought that
find
was
LA
still
Law.
on.
Um, but it was not like, oh, I want to be a lawyer. It was again, oh, I have this expectation of doing this degree. Which one will I do? You know what? Let me do a law degree because then it's a great thinking degree. It is a great foundation for pursuing other things. So let me go and do that. Um, and then finding myself in it and saying, oh, actually, I do kind of enjoy this one area of law. But looking around at the same time within the legal profession, and the big firms in Toronto, and watching other people, having sort of opportunities, getting plucked to off to do things, and I was sort of like, I'm working hard. Like, what about me? And I, rather than sort of thinking, oh, hold on a minute here, right? Watch and observe, enjoy this path. Okay, you're enjoying this right now. What is this about this that you're enjoying? Because it's not like you have this crazy idea that this is what you want to study back, when you finished your undergraduate degree. All right, what other experiences should you get? I was so fixated on it not happening fast enough. I probably missed some. I mean, there was lessons, there's great things that I took away from that time, but there was probably signs and maybe opportunities, maybe possibilities that I couldn't see because I was so fixated on why isn't this happening faster for me?
Yeah, yeah, it's such an important lesson, isn't it? We don't pay attention to what is best for me at the moment because we're distracted by what's happening around us, right? And it's always a journey, obviously, and you're learning something every time. We're going to go into our first break, and when we come back, I want you to tell the story of meeting the founder of 85 Broads because I think that was a turning point for you, for sure. Stay with us as we go into our breaks. You'll hear from our watch team of corporate partners, and we'll be back with Kelly Hoey.
Hi, my name is Christy McCaffrey. I'm the founder and owner of Be the Good Media, and I'm here to share some good news with you. Today, I wanted to share with you about a guest that I had on my podcast named Jen Welby Gilbert. Jen is an elementary school teacher who says that she wants her students to know that they are never too young to make a difference and that they have the ability to change the world. After years of implementing her own program in her classroom to help her students understand the process and the value of giving and philanthropy, Jen went on to create her own nonprofit called the Giving Project for Children, where she's now created a curriculum that she shares with parents, teachers, and administrators to help encourage the study of philanthropy and giving in classrooms. How inspiring is that? That is some good news. To hear more of our conversation, you can visit bethegoodmedia.com. And there you'll also learn more about how Be the Good Media works to amplify impact-driven missions and causes. Again, I'm Christy McCaffrey. Listen here for more good news on Women to Watch. Hi, I'm Dawn Zier, CEO, Board Director, and Executive Mentor to Fortune 500 executives through my work at the Exco Group, firm of experienced CEOs, board directors, and global business leaders who offer real-world experience to help organizations and senior leaders grow. Today on Leadership Watch, we're going to talk about being in the driver's seat of your career. No matter what stage you're at in your career, you need to grasp that you are in the driver's seat. Understanding from day one that you and you alone are responsible for your career is critical. After all, why would you hand your career over to someone else to manage? There's no one as vested in yourself as you, and the ugly truth is that most managers are focused on execution rather than team development. So how can you ensure that your career stays on track? First, make sure you have a clear set of agreed upon goals that are measurable, and if priorities shift, rewrite them with buy-in. 2, if you see something that can be improved upon or automated, don't wait to be asked, just do it. This is good advice for tech-savvy millennials and Gen Zs who can help lead the way with AI. 3, don't insulate yourself. Get to know other parts of the organization and network both internally and externally. Feel free to drive outside of your lane. And 4, while your career is yours to own, don't go it alone. Identify sponsors and mentors. Also, it's important to make self-reflection and self-assessment a habit. Think through where you want to be 5 years from now and create a roadmap for yourself. Does your current path get you there? Are you passionate about what you're doing? Do you feel challenged? Are you learning? Do you feel respected? And importantly, are you a cultural fit? And is the company a cultural fit for you? If you answer negative to any of these questions, it's likely time for some course correcting. Please follow me on LinkedIn at Dawn Zier. And if you're a senior executive looking to grow in your career, check out excoleadership.com to learn more.
Welcome back to the show. I'm joined this week by Kelly Hoey, and Kelly is the founder of Build Your Dream Network. And Kelly, just before the break, I mentioned, a very impactful moment for you was meeting Janet Hansen, who was the founder of 85 Broads. And she appointed you to be the very first president of the Networking Global organization. So tell us the story and why was it so impactful for you?
Yeah, Janet is such a force of nature. So for those who don't know, and the name of the network as it was then known, 85 Broads, it was tongue-in-cheek because it started off as an informal alumni group of women who had worked at Goldman Sachs. And Goldman Sachs's headquarters back in the day was at 85 Broad Street. So 85 Broads was sort of tongue-in-cheek play on the address and where these women had started. And by the time I had become a member, it was like 35,000 business women, entrepreneurs, women executives globally. And I had joined the network because I was in a role. I had now moved out of the practice of law, had moved my big imaginative career journey and career path and career switch. I had transitioned into a management role in a law firm. So I just switched to the other side of the ledger. And I had been tasked with building a global alumni program for this firm. And I'd been given, a stick of gum and a paper clip and told, here's your cubicle. You don't have any staff, you don't have any budget, but it's really important to us, Kelly, go off and do it. So I sat there and I thought to myself, I need to find an example where there is a network that has been built based on the enthusiasm of the membership. So a bottom-up network versus a top-down network. And this is where I hit on 85 Broads. And I'm going into detail here because I think what I did, it's possible for other people to do in terms of putting yourself in front of serendipity, putting yourself in front of opportunity. So I went and became a member of 85 Broads, but I didn't just, slide my credit card in and become a member. Like, I rolled up my sleeves. I got involved. If there was something as a member I could do, I did it, whether it was online with blogging, whether it was, hey, I'll raise my hand and help, organize events. Like, I wanted to understand what made them tick. So it was my own selfish interest, but in executing my selfish interest, I was extremely helpful to them. And so it was within 6 to 9 months of joining, I get this call from Janet. Now, I share this. Janet had been a trader on Wall Street. If you've never had a conversation with a trader on Wall Street, it can be a little frightening the first time. Because they are direct, they want to know, they want answers. And I was like, whoa, what's going on here? But she called because she wanted to know who I was, what I was thinking and doing, why I was a member, but, the way a trader asked it, it can be, like I said, it was a bit like, whoa, what's going on here? And at the end of an hour-long phone call, she offered me a job that had never previously existed. So she offered for me to become the first president of the Global Business Network. Because she said to me, will you come and do what you're doing in your role right now for me? Like, I need that.
How did you get her radar, Kelly?
Because I was such an active member.
Okay, so she was again, you popping up everywhere.
Right. Well, this is where, like all of us can join a membership organization, whether it is a country club or our community or church or an online business group for women. And when we join, we can sit back and say, hey, what are you going to do for me? I've signed up. Sort of having Nirvana, entertain me. Like, we can take that kind of, grunge rock playing in my head at the moment. Okay, so we can sit back and say, hey, I'm here now, entertain me. Or we can say, hey, I intentionally joined this network. I am intentionally part of this community. What can I do? How can I be involved? How can I be of service to myself by being of service to other people? And so by showing up and doing that, something any of us can do, Janet was like, who the heck is this person? She appears out of nowhere. She's doing more than any other member to contribute. I got to find out what's going on. I mean, Janet could have been suspicious. She could have been thinking, I was just blunt with her. I said, I'm building an alumni program and I need to understand how a dynamic network works because I got one shot at getting this alumni program right. You've been doing this for this period of time and you do not have large overhead and a large staff. I need to understand this. And in the meantime, I'm having a great time getting to know everybody and testing things out. So at the end of this hour-long phone call, she said, would you do this for me? Here's what the role would be. And I got off that phone call and I was like, wow. Like, here is someone who saw such bigger possibility of who I was, what my value was, what I could contribute than I had ever imagined for myself. Janet didn't ask me to keep my head down and do good work. She said, like, do more, like shine more, stretch more. Like, Janet has a way of seeing and bringing out the best in people. It's really extraordinary. And I think, as I said, when you and I had sort of pre-conversations, like there's no point in even imagining where my career would be if it wasn't for Janet. Because she not only pushed, she demanded that I step out of my comfort zone.
Wow. She believed in you. It's talk about the importance of someone else believing in us, because we talk a lot on the show about we need to believe in ourselves for sure. But when someone else sees it in us, why is that different? Why does that matter?
Are you familiar with that? It's that longitudinal study out of Harvard. I'm going to say happiness, but that's not what it is. It's a study they started with Harvard graduates. The study's been going on for like 50, 60 years now. And it was a study with the students, starting with the students in terms of their well-being and how they turned out. And it was with men, but they decided, the social sciences, we can't just study a bunch of, at that time when the study would have started, it's more than 50 years, maybe it's 80 years the study's been going on. Like, it's one of the longest longitudinal qualitative studies ever conducted on sort of factors of success and well-being and all of this. And so I guess the researchers were like, well, we can't just study these Harvard grads, Harvard students, this pretty elite group. Let's expand the study. So they included in the Boston area some participants who were not from the best neighborhoods, not having the same advantages. And what they found is exactly what you're talking about, how important it is. So some of these study participants who were in these very disadvantaged situations, when they had someone who believed in them,
Mm-hmm.
it could be a teacher, maybe it wasn't an immediate family, but it was someone, it changed everything. Like,
Yeah.
why, like when they start like piecing it through, saying, okay, here's what happened, the quality of relationships. Oh, right. It wasn't just that you got a great education, that you succeeded in life, or that you went to Harvard. There was this other thing of this factor of these quality of these relationships, but it shows up when someone didn't have the same advantages of, going to Harvard and,
Yes.
et cetera. So those were that having someone believe in you and being open to hearing it is so important.
I see it over and over and over again. And as you're describing that, I'm thinking to myself, maybe it's the validation of your gifts that you deep down know you have, but maybe don't have the courage yet to, when you talked about Janet telling you to be bright and do more, right? I think we often have a belief way down deep, that we're here for a reason, but we don't have the courage to go be it until someone else validates that for us.
Yeah, it's like someone giving us permission to take a risk. It's someone, not in a negative way, saying you should work harder, but they're opening a door saying, I can see you walking through this. I can see you being more, and that inkling for some people can unlock many things, and sometimes that belief comes within our family, and sometimes it's that, well, it's that incredible teacher we had. Oh, it is the, you name it. For me, a massive one was Janet Hansen.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great story. Um, you've had a really exciting career and you've met some amazing people. And you actually, I was so excited to see that you went to a dinner with Malala and her parents, because I always say, who is more brave than Malala, who as a child went through what she went through and then continued to speak out? She's just so incredibly brave. What was that like?
Because I got to tell you a story about her father. So it was real. Okay, so there's so many layers and there's so much. Like, this is where, in terms of building relationships and finding people who you value, and helping people just for the sake of helping them out. So I met a guy by the name of David Bigelow. He was wealth management at JP Morgan Chase at the time, and I was involved in the startup community. He was building connections within the startup community, because at some point, if you're a tech founder, right, you take in all this money and you scale your business and you hope you have an exit. And he knew that he'd rather start building relationships with those founders when they were in the early stages, when no one still believed in them. He's like, I want to believe in them then, so that when they get to the point that they have this life-changing, this exit, I've been there on the journey, so that I'm not showing up like salesmen saying, hey, you've got an exit. Here's what I can do to manage your money. Like, he's not, doing that.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know what? That long-term view on building relationships, that fits with me. So David, I'm going to help you. So I would invite him to startup events. I would bring people to founders to the events that they were doing at the bank, so that he could expand his network in the founder community in New York.
Can I ask you, you're doing this all while still practicing law?
No, I stopped practicing law. So this is the ones I stopped practicing law in 2002, moved into law firm, left the management,
Okay.
Did management for 5.5 years, then was with 85 Broads for a year, then really got in the startup community. So, but it was really from, once I met Janet and did the 85 Broads, that's when my network and my sort of this universe cracked open. And then I was really really involved in the startup community.
Okay.
But this relationship building mentality of mine, that started back when I was practicing law. So there was a whole lot of, listen, there's baggage I shed and there's baggage I kept, as I moved along in my career. So David, like the way he thought about relationship building, I was like, that fits with my worldview and the way I think about relationships and how we build them. And you find people that you are like-minded that way in terms of valuing, and where can you add, where can you support somebody else without any expectation of, oh, I've scratched your back, time to scratch mine kind of thing. So fast forward a couple of years of knowing David, and he texted me and he said, like, what are you doing, like, on this date, this time? And I'm like, I guess you're going to tell me. He said,
You tell me, what am I doing?
what am I doing? Yeah. He said, there's a cocktail party, and I want to know if you can come. And I can give you more of the details. But it's going to be in Midtown. It's with someone very prominent. You're going to have to stay off social media. And are you available? And I'm like, well, I'm intrigued and I am clearing my calendar. So I get the details. And so there's this cocktail party at a very prominent New York real estate family's home. They were the hosts for this event. It's one of those times in New York you keep a straight face when the doorman says go to 17 or whatever floor it was, and you want to say what apartment number, and then you realize it's the entire floor.
You're going to
sort of casually act like you're used to this sort of thing. And you stand there in their home and you're thinking, I've seen that painting before, and you're like, oh right, it was on loan to the Met Museum. So it was already.
And you can't tell me who it is.
But well, I can, because yes, it was Ann Tish was the host, and part of that was because Ann had started, and I knew her from 85 Broads. So that was interesting because Janet was there. So it was actually people I connected with, but I was there as David's guest for the cocktail party. So that's an important little factoid because things change in a second. And Anne was hosting in part because highly connected and beautiful home, but she started the first all-girls public school in New York City, the first one that had been opened in, like 50 years. So a lot of those girls were invited to the dinner because they were the same age as Malala was at the time. Because Malala would have probably been like, 16, 17? No, it was because it was pre-college. So she might have been somewhere between, I think she was probably about 16 at the time because she hadn't headed off to, university in the UK, but the family was living in the UK. So I'm there. Everyone, of course, is racing to chat with Malala. No one's talking to her parents. So I went to talk to mom and dad. So let me talk about that story, and then let me make sure I come back to David. So I start talking to the parents. Now, her mother does not speak any English. Dad does. So I start talking with Dad. So this is not to take away from Malala, because you can't. She is, the way that woman radiates, and meeting her and chatting with her, like, you look and you think to yourself, I don't know what I would do in that situation, but thank you for doing what you did. But her father told me this story. So when he and his wife got married, and the first pregnancy his wife had, wife is in the bedroom, giving birth at home. The entire extended family is like in the other part of the house with this ancient family, like 400, 500 years of Malala's father's family, this scroll, the family tree, and they're waiting for the child to be born. The first child that Malala's parents had was a girl, and she was stillborn. And when the family member came out, I don't know if it was Malala's father or someone else, came out to say, my wife's fine, but the baby has died, and it was a girl. The male family members who were in control of the family tree and were going to write the name of the new child on the family tree celebrated because it was a girl. You don't want your firstborn to be a girl. And they rolled up the family tree and off they went. So pregnancy number 2 happens. Malala is born. Malala's father comes out and say, yes, we have a healthy baby, a alive baby girl. And the family member who was in control of the family tree starts to roll it up. And I'm going to get emotional here. Her father went over, put his hand down, unrolled this family tree that has like 400 years of names, 500 years of names on it. It was extensive. And he writes down underneath his and his wife's name, he writes down Malala's name.
Wow.
And it was the first time in that family history that a girl's name had been written there as the child who had been born. So this is not to take away from Malala, but her father and mother are pretty extraordinary.
Yeah. My gosh, that so speaks to what has given her the courage, the support and belief of her father. And you can see that in all of the interviews and all of the conversations.
Sometimes you succeed in spite of, the family, and sometimes you succeed because of. And you sort of think, in some places, some families, let's put it that way, in some families, a girl speaking out like that, you would have been told to tone it down, right? You've been told not to do that.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have been supported or encouraged. And, some people excel when they're told not to, and some excel because they know they can go home to a family that loves them and believes. But yeah, her father unrolled that scroll. So back to the cocktail party after I had this, I was supposed to be there for the cocktail party.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Because I've been in those instances where I've been invited and I'm in a place and it's fabulous, but I don't yet know exactly why I'm there. So when you step into that, what you have to maneuver those conversations. People you don't know. You don't know why you're quite there.
Well, I mean, part of it was like David extended this extraordinary invitation to a room that I would never imagine being in. Extraordinary opportunity to meet this icon. And I looked at it as like, I got an hour and a half of just like, wow, like, let me just soak this in. Let me just be curious. Let me just, like, if I got to shake her hand and stand there with her, or like I said, like if I just get to learn who else is in the room and just at the end of the day, just have bragging rights that I was like in this extraordinary place. Hey, that's cool. And you know what, this is very kind that David asked me. So I, to be able to say, like, wow, thank you. And hey, David, how can I help you in the future? Because you've just done this for me. Like that was all I was expecting.
Yeah.
So it was about the time at this event where those who had been invited for cocktails, like, bye-bye. And a very small group was staying for dinner. And I knew like cocktail hour was over. So it was like, all right, find David, say goodbye, head to the elevator and, walk downstairs and go, like, look where I was.
That was so fun.
Now I can let my cool veneer down and I can just like call all my friends, like whatever. And David looks at me and he goes, you're at table 2. I'm like, what are you talking about? Cocktail hour's over. I'm leaving. He goes, no. You're taking my seat at the dinner. I'm leaving.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Another surprise.
Well, again, it was, and it was also one of those times where, okay, things my family of origin were sticklers on, dinner table manners. Boy, was I glad that I had that as a child, because I sat down and Ann Tish's husband was across from me. Malala's parents were sitting next to him. Kerry Kennedy was on my left, and the head of the Tory Birch Foundation was on my right. And I was like, well, I'm not at the kids' table.
You know what? You're so personable and real and authentic. He didn't have any qualms with you taking his seat. And I think that, really that's what has allowed you to be in all of these amazing places. because of who you are.
There might be an element of that, and I also think there's just an element for David that he was an extraordinarily generous, giving person, someone who knew, like, okay, I can expand my influence and build my network by actually stepping out of the way. I can have more people connected to me by putting my proxy in at the table than if I insisted. Like, he was so egoless that way. It was really beautiful, really
Yeah,
beautiful.
it's another great lesson, which let's talk about the book. Um, and I building your dream network, people, I often wonder if, depending on your level of being comfortable in social situations, especially in large rooms with a lot of people, some people just can't do that. And so, one of my questions for you is, what is a kind of a trick for someone coming into a situation like that where they're purposefully wanting to connect for opportunities, but they don't have that ability to kind of let go of I have to be really my best self at this moment.
Yeah, the moment we're too much in our head, that's when, you know,
Yeah.
everyone's BS detectors go off and they're like, this
Yeah.
person's not authentic, whatever. But
Yeah.
you hit it on it before when you asked me. You said, um, understanding why I was in that room with Malala. And this is what I always say to people before you hit yes on an RSVP, before you even step in that convention center, like, why are you there? And allow that why, that reason you chose to show up, allow that to drive your behavior. So if I'm extended an invitation because you're getting an award and you said, oh my gosh, could you be there? I'm nervous and there's all these people and I have to give a speech. And I'm like, I am there for my friend. I am going to sit in the front row. I do not need to leave with 15 business cards. I don't have to talk to anyone else. I just need to be there for her. Now, anything else after that is, it's a bonus. But I know why I'm in the room, or if it's, I want to hear this speaker, or everyone keeps telling me I need to be part of this network. You should join this chamber of commerce. You should, the shoulds, right? This is where I say always ask more questions. And then if you're like, you know what, I'm curious, I want to investigate this, then go in with that mentality. I would start with that from the minute I, show up to pick up a name tag. I would tell the people who are organizing the event, I'm new, I'm curious to learn more. Who should I talk to? But let that reason drive your behavior. Because if you don't know why you're in the room, there's no hack, there's no, oh, gee, here's 3 icebreaker questions you can use. It's always going to be awkward. Why are you doing this? Let that drive, because in a world where there's so many demands on our time and attention, right? The more we can be present, the more we can be intentional, the more likely we're going to build the authentic, genuine connections we need around our careers.
Yeah. Um, what is next for Kelly Hoey?
Working on my next book, which
Working on
I'm
your, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So the first one, Build Your Dream Network, really about, I mean, a lot of it is sort of the lessons and the guidance and the things that I've observed in terms of building the right network of relationships to pull, you can tap into and pull on around your career, as opposed to advice on how you work a room per se, rather than how are you living your life. And here's some practical, actionable ways to ensure that whether you're an entrepreneur or you want to do a TED talk or you want to move up the corporate ladder or you want to get a corporate board position, here is how you do this. And here's this very focused from what are your goals, what's your why, build your network. Starting in 2020, I fell down a rabbit hole of research that had come out and I'd been asked to comment on. It seems that high achieving women build a different network structure than everyone else. And it plays out in, I'm going to say, research in multiple sectors and industries and roles in terms of whether someone's in management or executive or if they're just entering. And I was like, hold on a minute here. If there's this recipe on how to build like the type of network you need to have around your career to increase the likelihood of success, and this is a critical professional factor for women, oh, I want to write about this and make sure that every woman has the recipe book, because more women getting to whatever their definition of success, that means the world to me.
So tell me what you think the world would look like if we had more women running countries.
You know, I wrote about this, right?
I know. In the New York Times, I believe.
Yeah, it was fascinating.
I did my homework.
You know what? I think women need to be given the chance to excel, fail, make mistakes, try again, with the same level of, I'm going to say, criticism and resurrection, that men have. Women are going to make mistakes. Women are going to, do stupid things just like, the other gender does. We should be given the same chance to do that. And I think the piece I did for the New York Times, what was really fascinating was that this wasn't just the prime minister of Aruba being a woman. The minister of finance is a woman. Close to half their parliament were women. Now, it's not a large one, but okay. But then you started looking at the main levers of the economy, from the central bank to tourism, headed by women. And then you looked at who reported to them. And then you kept going down these layers, and it was women everywhere. And you're like, hold on. Particularly with the demographic of the women at the top, when I see in North America and other, large industrialized countries, women stepping out. These women never did. And it was fascinating to discover the reasons. And when I asked them, I said, did you ever? And they would look at me like, did you just grow another head out of your shoulder? Like, I remember one woman I said, did you ever think about like taking some time off, raising kids, like not working? And she looked at me and she's like, that's the funniest question I've ever been asked. Like, it perplexed her that I asked this question. And so for me, what was interesting, the fact that these women were like, well, we just did what needed to be done. Here's what with the economy, here's the history, here's what was going on with why men stayed away because of a lack of jobs, and why women, this dual obligation of supporting the family and career and maybe that third factor, this love of country, all like it was like the perfect storm, that the women went back to Aruba. Like, I need to support my family. I'll live at home. The country can't fail. I'll take whatever job. And then they were there when the economy turned around. Men taking the jobs overseas, sending money home. That all of a sudden, when things improved, it was the women who were in these positions. Now, what's interesting is when you talk to young men entering the workforce, like even asking them, saying, whoa, what do you think it's like? You're reporting to women, women you work with, like they just look at you blankly like, isn't it like this everywhere?
Yeah, this is the way it is.
Yeah. And so I think, like, for more than anything, the opportunity to have a broader perspective and a broader pool of people being allowed to move up to top roles, I think we'll just have better decision making.
Yeah. Well, we certainly have seen more today than we ever have. And certainly when we were growing up in the 70s, and your mom was, told to get married and have children and don't have aspirations beyond that,
Right.
which seems
Yes.
so silly. So I'm happy for that. But I so much enjoyed this conversation. Kelly, you're such a great storyteller. We'll have to have you back on the show another time.
Well, we got the new book. I'll take you up on
The
that.
new book, yeah, for sure. Well, we'll be sharing information when the show goes up live next week. And I thank you so much for taking time to be on the show and share your career journey and personal life story.
Thank you so much.
Stay with us as we go into our last break to hear from our watch team, and I'll be back to close out the show.
We are CHOP, and we can't wait to show you around. We're the nation's first children's hospital. Now, a care network with more than 50 locations that continues to expand. 3 state-of-the-art research buildings with 1.5 million square feet of space. We have grown from 12 beds 165 years ago to nearly 600 beds and one of the best children's hospitals in the world. We have a level 1 trauma center, 11 floors of patient units, more than 20 operating rooms, first of its kind delivery unit for babies with birth defects, a separate cardiac operative and catheterization suite, and places to learn, like our internationally recognized simulation center. We have trained generations of leaders in the field of pediatrics. We are world leaders in medicine, surgery, and science. One of the top recipients in NIH funding for pediatric research. In this building, pioneers in CAR T therapy, mitochondrial disease, brain tumors, hyperinsulinism, and other rare diseases. Here, groundbreaking work in fetal surgery, genetics and genomics, and neurology. In our newest building, leaders in social determinants of health, clinical informatics and epidemiology, autism, trauma and injury prevention. Our patients come from every state and 115 countries. Meeting these challenges requires the best and the brightest. We are passionate about pediatrics. We are motivated to make a difference in the world and in our community. We are a team. We are CHOP.
That's it, everyone, for another week of Women to Watch. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Kelly. Thanks, as always, to our watch team of corporate partners for bringing us their expertise and news from their industries. And I hope you have a great week.